check, good. So I'm Max Ceron, Max Ceron, CWB Association Welding Podcast. Today we have a really cool guest, Welding Podcast.
The show is about to begin.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the CWB Association Podcast. My name is Max Ceron, and we are here with another special guest, a good old Canadian boy who has been very successful both north and south of the border. We have Grant Schwartz with us, who is the owner of Grant Schwartz Welding or Schwartz Welding, and is also, you can find him on Instagram and Facebook under the same name. Grant, how are you doing?
I'm good, Max. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. And where are you located right now? Where are you kind of broadcasting from?
So I'm at home in Bloomingdale, Ontario. I have recently built a small shop here where I've downsized a little bit. And so as I like to joke, this is where all the magic happens. And the other joke is I call it a studio now, so I can charge whatever I want.
Oh yeah, once you enter the art game, then you can. There is no per hour fee that you got to stick to, right?
Right.
So a lot of people know you through your show. I watched you on the hot rod shows down in the States, Vegas Rat Rods, and I've been following a little bit of the work you do up here. I'm a car guy. I built cars. I used to run a fab shop building cars when I was younger. It was like a stint that I went through right after the Pimp My Ride phase. I had a fab shop, and I kind of turned my fab shop into a car shop because it was just so much work for it. And then it kind of dwindled out, and then I went off to work for private industry. But you ran that gamut for your career, and I think that's it's amazing and it's interesting, and we're gonna get to that point later. But let's go to the beginning. Where were you born? Where are your roots?
So I grew up right here in Bloomingdale, actually in the house next door, believe it or not.
Wow.
Yeah. I was always typical. I like to take stuff apart and never really knew how to put it back together. But I have a couple. My father passed when I was quite young, so I have a few gentlemen that were kind enough to be big brothers, if you will, to me. And one of them was my godfather, who was a welding instructor at a local school. And so I was kind of introduced to it quite young, and I was amazed at what you could accomplish and what you could achieve and put together with the skills required. And so that's really how the bug got started. And
so how old were you at this age? Like you're talking like 10, 12 years old already, or?
Yeah, probably that young. I didn't do any welding until I was probably in my early teens.
Okay, cool.
When I started. And then oddly enough, my mom come home one day and says, I have a job for you. And I said, where? She goes, at the local welding shop. And I said, well, I don't know how to weld. But the good part was that fellow was more than happy to teach me, and I was super eager to learn. So it worked out really well. I learned a lot of things at that first welding shop because we fixed everything from manure spreaders to erecting steel buildings and everything in between. So it was very fortunate for me to be able to learn so many little things along the way.
Yeah, the custom fab game for the young welders that listen to the show, it's those custom fab jobs they're hard to get. There's not a lot of that work out there, but I was in that when I first started too, and you learn so much. Like it's new all the time, and often custom fab shops get into jobs where they don't quite know how they're going to do what they promised they were going to do. So it's kind of a learning curve.
Exactly. And then being exposed to so many things from some you've seen before and some you've never seen before. So again, it took me actually a bunch of years to realize how important that first job was for me and how awesome it was for him to take the time, let me wreck some stuff and fix some stuff and teach me what he knew. He had way more experience than I did. So it really was a fortunate opportunity for me. And I've been fortunate to have a bunch of opportunities over my lifetime, and that was how it started, I guess.
So this is like in high school still. You're kind of working already. So did you already have that in you? Like I just got to get through high school and I'm going to be a welder. Is that what the plan was, or did you have any other kind of plans you were thinking about?
I would say I definitely wanted to work with my hands. I looked at being an auto mechanic. I actually took that for co-op. And the good thing is it taught me I didn't want to be an auto mechanic. I learned a lot, and I can appreciate that trade, but just wasn't for me. And so, yeah, by the time I hit the end of high school, I knew I wanted to have a welding shop or work in the welding field. So I was lucky in that regard, because so many people today have no idea what direction they want to go in. It's very tough. So I had a real good idea what the direction I wanted to go in, and it made my life a little easier for that. So I was working, I wasn't driving when I had that job at my first welding shop. And I think I've worked at a welding shop almost, ever since that time, or for myself. So that was, yeah. And then as soon as high school ended, I started my own business at 19 years old, with a portable welding truck, and pretty much never looked back since then.
So how does that work? You're 19 years old. It's tough for a young person to start a business because there's not a lot of trust from industry. Like, what do you know? And even us, as we get older, we look at a 19-year-old and go, what do you know? Like, you try not to fall into that path, but it's hard not to. So for a 19-year-old with a welder on the back of a half ton, how did that work? Was it a success? Did you have to really lean on the people you knew? How did you get work?
That's a great point. I had a friend help me at the time. There was a government program called the Youth Venture Program, and I applied for that. It was for youth starting new businesses, and so I think I received the maximum amount, which was $7,500, interest free and payment free for 1 year, and that helped me purchase the rest of my equipment. But I was working at several welding shops prior to that, and had a small name for myself. But good enough to the point where the shop that I left on good terms. And so they would actually hire me a little bit for the spillover work. And the first year was pretty lean. And I had been knocking on doors before I started and told people, I think I want to do this. And so I had some pretty good support. Again, the first year was pretty lean, and I worked a lot of hours. Like, if they called, I went. Didn't matter if it was what day of the week it was or what time of the day or night, I went. And so you have to work hard to make it happen. And I was happy to do so. And so it took off well from there.
Yeah, it's a very interesting sense of responsibility when you're a business owner. I mean, you started younger than me. I was 25 when I started my first one. And it's almost overwhelming. A lot of people talk about getting into business for themselves, dip their toes into it, and quickly realize that it's kind of madness. It's kind of madness because there is no downtime. Like, I mean, you're constantly thinking about what's next because there's no guaranteed paycheck. There's no guaranteed hours, and for a young person, sometimes that's a really good on the side of you have all the time in the world, theoretically. You're young, you got lots of energy. You can get out 3 a.m. and work for 8 hours, whatever. You can do what you need to do. But on the other hand, it's the, are you making enough money? Are you making the right choices? Are you buying the right grinding disc because it's 10 cents less than that grinding disc? And it's stuff like that you're not so good at when you're young.
Exactly. The bonus for me was I had a little bit of time in the experience. Sorry, a little bit of experience in the business, and I had actually overlapped a little bit, so I continued to work for the company for, I'm going to guess, maybe 6-8 months, and only worked on nights and weekends. And I tell people now, if they want to start a business, if you can do it on the side, it's a good starting point. Then you work until you think you don't have enough time, then do it for another 6 months just to make sure, and then jump in with both feet, and hopefully it works out.
Yeah. So when you were welding at this point, you're now 20, you're getting into your early 20s with your shop. Did you think that this is it? This is the business you're going to grow for the rest of your life? Was it like a upward trajectory, or what were some of the obstacles and maybe roadblocks you had at that stage?
I was pretty confident that this is what I want to do. I like working with my hands. I like to fabricate, and I had gotten pretty good at welding, so I was pretty comfortable with that. And it did move up quickly. I rented a small shop, and things started to escalate. And within a couple of years, I had several employees. And one of the first hurdles I remember very well was it was time to become CWB certified. And as a small business, it's a bit of an expense and some yearly,
a lot of paperwork.
A lot. And I was the paperwork scared me a lot. And so I put it off for a long time, and I would get caught on job sites, usually by the same inspector, and he would rattle my cage every time. And fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
And finally he says, listen, you have to get your certification. I'm going to have to start calling. I says, I understand. So I jumped in. I see those decisions are ones you have to decide whether you're going to make them or not make them. And then if you're going to do it, you have to jump in with both feet and move ahead. And so I had a bit of help getting the certification. CWB was great to deal with. I learned a lot along the way as well. It was quite knowledgeable to see what goes on. So I got that done, and that helped out with more work. Once you're certified, I was able to tackle more work.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of my first hurdles. And then it was buying equipment. I remember I learned how to lease equipment because I never heard of that before. And so I was leasing some equipment here and there, lease to own, and try to keep the money flowing at a nice level.
A manageable pace.
In and out. Yeah. So that was good. Knock on wood, I never had any major injuries with me or my crew. So that was always a good thing. And I did find a couple of hardworking guys that we got along with quite well for maybe 5 years, and so it went well. And yeah, I love doing, again, in the steel building, we did mostly steel buildings and homes. So a lot of structural steel and some miscellaneous stuff, but I got quite proficient at it, and we enjoyed it. And it's nice to see at the end of the day, you've accomplished something when you actually erect a building or install a set of stairs. It's very rewarding to see it done at the end of the day.
Well, and then you start turning into that tradesman that every time you drive by with somebody being like, that house right there inside, I did it all. Or like, like you start.
My wife probably hates hearing that.
You know, but we've already hit a couple really good points that you brought up that I think it's very valuable for people in Canada. I'm not sure how it works in the States, but I know in Canada, these are things that people need to look. The names might change over time, but there's always grants. There's always programs to help entrepreneurs in this country get ahead. When I started up my first business was an immediate crash and burn. I was like, I know how to weld. I'm just going to do a thing. And I just didn't think it through, and it was really bad. But then learned my lesson, waited a year, started the next one. And I went for, at the time, I think it was called the Western Canadian Development Fund or something like that. And I got 10 grand, same thing, no interest for a year. And that helped me get, a brake press, a roller, a shear, used, but whatever.
Yeah.
Got them in the shop, and then I could, okay, these are the tools I need to start forming steel, and I can actually, because getting things cut and getting things formed for you is expensive. If you can get your hands on a small shear, and I mean, before I had gotten my brake press, I was like using, heavy angle iron with like car jacks to like bend and form my own. Like, you create your own tools, but they're not so great, and they break, and they're not so accurate. But without that grant, I would have been stuck in the water for a long time. And you got a grant too, and those things are out there. And if you're serious about business, you got to be serious about business, not just welding. Welding's a piece of the business, and that business has a lot of other angles. And there's free training programs by the government on bookkeeping and taxes and stuff like that. Becoming CWB certified, you learn about management of consumables, and then your steel and tracking and all these things that are very useful in running a business. And these are things that you'll learn, right?
It really is true. And I think that looking back, not my biggest regret, but I could have been much better on the business side of things. I probably could have made a bunch more money, and things might have gone a bit smoother. But and I think you're right. I think it's hard to find those government programs, but I think you'd be shocked at how many are out there, and why not take advantage of them, right?
Absolutely. And now that I'm on this side of the fence, right, I see how much money doesn't actually even go out. Like, the government will put money aside to give to people. And this is an issue I sit in meetings that's kind of blowing my mind. And now working for the association, doing things like this podcast stuff, it's a lot about me preaching to people about, like, get out there and take it. Like, take the stuff that people offer you. Don't be shy. Don't think it's weird to apply for money. If you don't take it, sometimes it literally doesn't go anywhere. Like, what a waste. Like, just get in there, guys. Get in there and take it.
Absolutely.
So you're running the shop now. You're growing. You got you got a space. You got employees. This is the real deal. In your youth, you were into cars. So I'd imagine that with the growth of your life, the cars were probably running side by side with you as you went. Were you always working on cars and kind of playing with cars, or were you just like a car owner where you would buy and sell, or what was your car world? How did this start to merge into one?
I would always be playing with something, and then that kind of projected itself onto making building welding rigs as well. I probably built 5 of them over my time, and
Mhm.
that's to me just an offshoot of building a custom car.
Yeah.
It's your own personal taste. So I build a number of trucks, and I love doing that as well. But then being busy all the time, there wasn't always a time for that. So I just took it as it came, and and then I'm jumping ahead here, but then it was a local hot rod shop who I knew a little bit, and we talked once in a while, and he says, "Why don't you come work with us?" And I was a little bit shocked, and I thought, boy, could I really do that? And so I did. I talked with my godfather, who's
Mhm.
great for advice, and I says, I have this opportunity. I also have this business that's going quite well, but I says, this is kind of a dream of mine. And so we talked about it, and I made the decision to make the jump. And so I kind of just shut that business down and went to work for this guy. And again, fortunate enough to have this opportunity pop up for me, and it's brought me to another
Mhm.
opportunity in my life, which I'm so fortunate to get.
So let's go back to that transition period where you're running your shop and things are good. And when things are good in running a shop, you kind of don't have time to think really about anything else. You're kind of holidays are out the window. You don't really think about those things. And I don't know if you started a family or not, or anything during this time, but then that's that other added layer because
Yeah.
now you're trying to carve out some time for your kids, which is really carving out time for your kids as a business owner means taking your kids to work with you. That's kind of how that works,
Sometimes,
really.
yeah.
Like I had a playroom for my kids in my shop. Like I built a playroom with a TV and a couch for them, being like, "Hey, man, sometimes you just got to be here with me all day. That's the way it is, right?"
Yeah.
And now, this passion for cars, what made you even look outside your boundaries? How did this conversation even come up where, hey, come work with me in the car world? What were you doing at the time? What were you involved with that allowed you to kind of even look outside your immediate borders?
So you made a good point. I did have a young
Mhm.
family at the time, and my wife was supportive of me. And so we had this chat, and he offered me a job. I knew it wouldn't be huge money.
Mhm.
My business was going well. It was calm at the time, I'll say. So I made the decision fairly quickly, and I just sent an email out and told everybody. I says, it's in 1 month I'm going to be done, and people were quite shocked. And then my rationale was I didn't want to be 50, 60 plus years old on the roof of a building in the middle of a winter storm. So I was happy to be able to work inside for a change and
Mhm.
not so many elements. So I thought I just had an early opportunity to take care of my body and learn more skills. I was into TIG welding a little bit at the time, and this was mostly TIG welding,
Yeah.
and so I made the decision, and people were a bit shocked, but they all got over it. I sold off a bunch of my heavier equipment, and got rid of my shop, and then I went to work for this fellow, and I learned a ton of stuff. It didn't last more than a year, about a year. And I'll take part of the blame for that, because once you work for yourself, it's hard to go work for somebody else.
It is very, yeah.
Right. So it only lasted a year, and in the meantime, I was building a small shop at home, and so after that, I came home and started working on hot rods at home. Maybe a little bit green in that world, but super eager, willing to
Mhm.
work hard. I was still young enough that I was willing to put in the time and the effort, and so that first job really expanded my skills towards the hot rod world and the custom car building. So it just kind of took what I knew already of fabricating and pushed them over the edge towards the car world. And so I did learn a ton of stuff, and I'll always be thankful for that. And then I
Mhm.
cut my teeth along the way, like everybody else does, and made mistakes and figured out
Mhm.
how not to do that again.
And it's interesting the skills. Some skills are transferable and some skills are not, and directly, anyways. In the structural world and in the fabrication world, you're looking at speed. You're looking at the ability to reproduce a product or an environment, and then just management of space. these things are very tight margins in the fabrication world. People are always like, why doesn't everyone have a fab shop? There's not enough work for that. It's tight margins in a fab shop. And people knock manufacturing shops, but manufacturing shops make money because it's repetition, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the fab world, you're either doing MIG, flux core, or stick if you're on site. That's it. Like, there's really not a space for TIG work in a fabrication shop because it's just too slow. Like, I mean, I got to make money, man. Like, I don't got an hour to weld an inch. Like, I don't, and no one cares that it's yellow and pretty. Like, it just needs to go out the door, right? When you move to the car world, you move to a lot more of because cars are like art, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot more of the finished product, a lot more, and it's not even so much like no one's asking you like how strong is that weld, but people don't even ask that. It's like, how well does that weld blend? How well does this fit? Is this going to interfere with the steering column? And I've watched people cut a big chunk right out of their main rail to get a steering, line through or something, and not even think that this is going to totally ruin the strength of the vehicle. But it's like it's a different set of skills and expectations. You know what I mean? And that transition for you from as a business owner to going to work somebody for your first job, I'd imagine that was a bit of a culture shock,
It was. It was. And that's why I say I'll take half the blame for that not working out. I was also worried about making money. I was moving from a fab shop, but was doing well and making money and trying to support my young family. And then so I was taking a leap of faith a little bit. And again, I'm happy I did. I would never look back. The money was okay and it paid my bills. So yeah. And then I've just kind of not looked back as far as from the car world. So I just kept expanding on what I was able to do and replaced some of my heavier equipment with some, more car related equipment. And I just kept moving forward. A couple of suppliers I deal with treat me quite well and send me any work, have good rapport with them. So, and I'm probably not the best business guy. I'm a small business guy. I don't think large in that sense. So I try to treat people real well, and it usually pays off quite well. You treat them like you'd want to be treated in any business, and treat them with respect, and it really seems to pay off.
Yeah, and knowing when to swallow something for a customer, because sometimes you screw up. I remember the very first big lift I did on a Jeep, like big lift. I think it was a 10-inch lift, and forgot about drive shafts. Like that's not a they don't line up. They don't fit no more. So, and I remember having to extend the drive shaft out. So like you extend it, and I had a small lathe, so like I machined it, made it look good, but it was off balance. Like it just was. And I didn't really think it was going to be that big of an issue to be like a half ounce off balance on a drive shaft. But let me tell you, it is a big deal. And the guy tried to drive it out of the shop and he came back like 20 minutes later being like, it's vibrating. And I that was a moment for me as a young business. I think I was like 26 being like, okay, I went out of my realm. I tried. I'm going to have to send this to a balancing shop now where they're going to have to take this part. And I think I lost money. Like but that's the small business thing. Big companies walk. Sorry, good luck. Have a nice day. As a small business owner, everything is on your like your what's the word I'm looking for? Like the respect that you build with your customers. You lose that, you got nothing, right?
Yep. Bad news travels way too fast.
Oh yes, that's for sure. So where were you? Where did you start? Like you on your own with your car shops. Did you start doing cars one by one as long-term projects, or did you start doing just small things like drops and lifts or doors, or like what was the angle you were trying to take there?
So my shop was small, so I could work on one vehicle at a time. And then at the time, Harleys were quite popular. So I was doing some wide tire modifications on the Harley frames, and I have a Harley frame fixture as well, so I can repair. So that was a nice smaller area. And most of my work in the hot rod world is what I call from the steering wheel down. I don't do any body work, no wiring. So it's mostly chassis work, mounting the engine, transmission, exhaust, suspension. And so my projects aren't typically, 6 months or a year or more. The perfect project for me is maybe a month.
Okay.
Build a chassis, get it all set together and set the body on. And then most of my customers will take it from there. So still heavy on the fabricating end of things.
Yeah.
And then the bikes have come and gone. They go in spurts. Just recently, I repaired a whack of original Harley frames. I don't know where they all came from. It just seems to go in spurts. So, but yeah, so that's what I was doing, a small shop at home. And then over the years, I also snuck into a couple of shops. Kitchener Steel is a local steel company that they're part of a big company, and they sell lots of structural steel for homes and whatnot. But I was doing all their fab work at my shop originally. And so they decided to open their own fab shop and asked me if I would help them do that. So I ran that shop for a little over a year as well. Did that also with another company in Cambridge, got them up and running and sorted out. But again, once you work for yourself, so on both of those, I got them up and running and then helped them find a replacement and said, thank you very much. Appreciate it. And hopefully it worked out well for them as well. But I've always come to myself. Yes.
Yeah. You're kind of like the shop whisperer.
Yeah. I like to think so.
Just bring Grant and everything will be fine.
Yeah. So.
All right. Well, this is a perfect time to take a break for our advertisers and the sponsors here of the show. We'll be back here with Grant Schwartz right after a few messages. So don't go anywhere here on the CWB Association podcast. And we are back here on the Association podcast. We have Grant Schwartz with us from Schwartz Welding, who has been all over the world in terms of building cars, and everyone sees him. You're all over the place, which kind of takes us to the shop whisperer aspect. You got your shop. You like that? I like that. I like that. Like you got your shop and at your house that you're doing your projects, and these are kind of like the labor of love, and you're working on the bikes on the side. You're kind of doing what you can with the space you have, which is, I recommend to anyone, if you have space, you might as well make money with it. And then you also have the kind of like pulls towards industry here and there, where once you do have a name for yourself, industry does pull you back. I've gone back into private industry many times, and then it's like I run away to go start another company, and then I get sucked back into private industry. But every time I learn, like in each transition, there's something new you learn. So
Absolutely.
How did you feel about going back to shops? Was there ever a thought when you went back to a shop that it's not yours, that maybe this one will stick, maybe I'll stay here? Or did you have those thoughts?
My thoughts for that was, because after working for yourself for so many years, your paychecks can be sporadic sometimes. The hours can be sporadic. So I thought, well, if I could work at a regular shop, we'll call it 8 to 5 from Monday to Friday, and get a regular paycheck every week. Well, this might be kind of nice. And it is, and it makes
it is, yeah.
You can
pension
go home
and benefits and those things. Yeah,
exactly. You can go home and kind of turn, lock the doors and walk away from it for the night. So it was all good. It just, once you work for yourself, it's tough because you feel like if they're not doing it your way, it's wrong. But that's not really my decision to make. And so I have to watch myself sometimes. So that's really why I work. And I've gotten to learn to like to work by myself as one person only. I'm set up well the way I've got it. And so you don't have to worry about anybody's attitude that day, if they had a bad day or a good day or all those things. So I enjoyed doing it, and I enjoyed working with most of the people I got to work with. And as you say, I learned something from every single excursion. It just expands your knowledge, which is to me the most important thing. I don't care if you work in a restaurant or in an office or in a fab shop. Every single job has great things that you can learn. And even if they're wrong, there's still good things to learn, right? Mistakes
Absolutely.
are how we learn. So I appreciated all of that.
Well, and you never know where your journey ends. Like, I mean, there literally 5 years ago, I would never have thought I would be sitting in this chair. Like, I mean, I was very happy working at a huge fab shop here in Regina, Saskatchewan. And I thought, this is great. I'm going to be great. This is everything I want. I'm in charge of a whole crew. I don't have to, I had a great boss who'd let me do kind of whatever I wanted. Like you said, like no one was breathing down my throat. I was like, I'll never leave this place. And well, things happen, you never.
I think you have to keep your mind open for opportunities. And if you're willing to give it a go, it's just more stuff you can learn. And I think, why not?
Yeah, exactly. So, you said something interesting about working by yourself, and that's something that I think is an interesting skill as a fabricator, because you sure rely on tool use. And I this is something that is very important for young people that are coming up, that, don't let obstacles be obstacles. Just learn what you need. Like nothing's for the single fabricator, clamps and magnets, man. Clamps and magnets. Like, I mean, you can get a long way with clamps and magnets. And but you don't, people get stumped. People get stumped. And when you work with other welders or other fabricators, sometimes you see people get stumped and you're like, no, that doesn't, there's no stopping, right?
No.
Like you have to figure this out one way or another.
Yeah, you don't have to have every tool in the arsenal. You just have to have the right tools. And after working by yourself for a number of years, you really realize which ones are the most important to help you. I'm new to my shop here at home. This one I built recently, and the one thing I truly miss is I was lucky enough to have a small overhead crane in the last shop. Well,
oh wow,
yeah, which was huge. So I'm still toying with, do I build a small gantry crane or something? That
just do a little A-frame. Yeah.
Space is a problem, right? So, and these are the things you learn working by yourself in limited space. You try to be as efficient as possible.
Yeah.
With all equipment.
Do a jib crane with a chain fall.
Yeah, and that might be just a ticket. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about where this path led you now. Like, I mean, obviously you have some accolades. I've seen the stuff online. You do shows, you get called out to do conventions, you get invited around. But before that happened, what was the beginning? For me, it was car shows. Some of my customers put some cars in shows that won some things, and then it's like, oh, where did you go? And that kind of started spreading my name a little bit around the world in that scene. What was it for you that started getting your name out there to be like, okay, this is higher end stuff, higher quality stuff that people will take pictures of, put on TV or put on, on calendars or whatever. What was it for you?
For me, it's the small business aspect, because I don't expect my business to grow leaps and bounds overnight, and I'm okay with that. So every vehicle that you work on and goes out, if you did a good job, that guy's going to tell 3 other people. And so the weird thing for me is that I don't quite often finish the vehicles. So it might be 6 months or a year, but when that vehicle hits the local cruise nights, well, they say, well, who did that? And that's, in a simple term, that's really how I grew my business. And I've always thought that way. I'd not want to advertise. Now, social media, when it came out, I'm the first guy to laugh at myself for being on it. But I will say in the last 5 to 10 years, 5 years for sure, social media has been very big. It's a very easy way to keep people abreast of what you're working on and show off your work. And the market can be huge. So that really has helped. And for not a lot of money output and nor time output. So it's cheap advertising if you're willing to put a little bit of effort into it. And that's really how I grew my business, just by word of mouth. I try to make sure nobody left unhappy. And that's one of the best things you can do.
Yeah. And when was the first opportunity that you had when you felt like, okay, this is starting to get to be more of a big deal now? What was the first job you got, or the first knock on the door for something that was coming that you're like, oh, this is getting pretty serious?
I did a 32 Ford chassis for a local hot rod legend. He had this car for many, many years, and it had been rebuilt many, many times. And he decided he wanted it one more time and really go at it. And so he brought me a set of original 1932 Ford frame rails that looked like Swiss cheese. They were like noodles. So they needed some work. And so I really went at them and did a good job, as I try to do for everybody. And the car turned out gorgeous, and he finished it in a pretty timely manner. So from me doing that chassis and then for him to have it on the road and the car turned out, he finished it up very nicely. So that was a real big feather in my cap. And because he was a local a well-known hot rod guy, it made a big difference. And then I have one other quick story on that. My cousin knows a friend, and he was doing a 32 as well years later, but didn't know that we knew each other. And so he says to his cousin, he goes, oh, I'm going out to Bloomingdale to see this guy about my chassis. My cousin goes, well, it's not Grant. He goes, it is. He goes, that's the guy. and to hear somebody say that's the guy to go to, I was completely blown away. And we're still doing work, me and that fella together. So it's pretty interesting. But that was a real feather in my cap to hear somebody say, that's the guy you got to go see for one of these.
Yeah.
And so that comes back to how my business has grown over the years. And at that point, I was in a bigger shop in Bloomingdale. I needed more space, so I rented a bigger space for a number of years, and that allowed me to bring more vehicles in to keep things moving along.
And did you, at that point with the bigger shop, that's probably the one with the crane in it, you know, you probably had a couple staff too. Like were you now thinking about this ramping up again?
I never had any full-time staff through the
Okay.
hot rod, all my hot rod stuff. I had a couple of people that would help me on the side, which was wonderful. I was quite content to be doing what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's still opportunity to ramp it up, but I'm not, that's not for me anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not an old guy, I don't want to say, but I'm at the age where I don't want to start getting bigger and getting employees. I'm looking to just calm things down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I still absolutely love what I do, but I want to work on my own stuff once in a while, and just tone it down a little bit. I've made a little bit of custom furniture and some other doodads over the years. And so I'd like to take the opportunity to maybe make something weird and different that I've never had the chance to do before.
It's funny how I'm in the exact same boat. I made an end table for the first time in my life last year, and with we were cutting down a tree in my lot, and I was like, the guys were here cutting the tree down. I was like, well, save me some big pieces. See if I can toy with it. I made an end table. And everyone's like, wow. And I was like, all I can do is look at this thing and be like, it's terrible. Like, I mean, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I'm just not comfortable. Like, and I have had so many artists on the show who are just so amazing at doing art. But for a fabricator, I live in the worlds of ones and zeros and things being square and perfect. And these are the ways I build things. For me to get out of that box and do a little bit of something artistic, for me, is a big stretch. It's a big stretch. People laugh and think like that's simple, but for me, it's like I gotta go to a whole nother place. Like.
Yeah, it really is. I'm not an artist in that sense because I can, and I'm the first to tell people, if you bring me a picture of something you like, I can build you something very similar to that with our own twist. But I have a hard time coming up with the initial idea.
Exactly.
But I love and again, those things are challenging and that makes it fun. So I'm actually was in the shop today. I'm making a quick wedding ring for a fellow this weekend on the lathe. He's got a wedding and they were just going to use the silicone rings. And I said, well, I can make you a quick one you can use for the wedding if you like. And I just love those little challenges.
Yeah. I know. I was looking at how some of the rings and jewelry they do online with just like braiding filler rod and hammering it out and buffing it up and then twisting it up and heat treating it. I was like, that is so creative. And I have like buckets of filler rod in my garage of like all the stub ends. It's like, why do I never have those ideas?
I know.
So let's talk a little bit about your work with the shows. You've been on some shows. You've done a little bit of TV stuff, and some of your work has been out there. How did those opportunities come up? How did that happen?
That's a real popular question. So the particular show is Vegas Rat Rods. The show was produced out of Canada for the first 3 seasons, even though it was filmed in Las Vegas. So they need their Canadian content to get the money.
Yeah.
So they needed another Canadian person on the show. Had a casting call on Facebook. My friend sent me, and I thought, that'll never happen. And so he bugged me a little bit. So I reposted it and asked my friend, said, listen, if you think I should do this, do me a favor and send me an email on my behalf. Tell them what you think. Well, even though that wasn't the way they were asking to do it, come Monday morning, this girl says, I opened my computer, said, I have to call you. She was like, I got so many emails. So it was very humbling that all my friends would do that for me. And so they called. There's about 350 people that applied for that job. They quickly narrowed it down to 4 or 5. And I think within 2-3 weeks, it was down to just, I think, 2 of us. And they came to my shop and filmed for a day. They basically made a 2-minute commercial to show off what I could do. And they want to see you on camera. So I was lucky enough. They felt that I had the skills to physically do the work, but they also felt that my personality would fit on camera with the rest of the crew. So I think it was maybe less than 2 months after that, I was in Vegas for the next 7 months.
Wow.
Filming season number 2. So I had to kind of close my shop down again. I talked with all my customers, and they were quite understanding. So I tried to get as much stuff done as I could before I left, and the rest of them had to wait, and they were good with it.
Well, and that's an interesting opportunity, you know, like through the car world, I got to work on a couple Hollywood movies building set equipment because they're like, oh, you're a welder fabricator. I had come in as a picture vehicle technician just to help assist with some car builds, but then they're like, oh, you have CWB certification, so you can actually build like real frames. And for the explosion techs, they needed certified, equipment for the dynamite and stuff that they blow up. And so I went double duty, and then I ended up working on it's just like the people you know and the things you do.
Perfect.
But for a guy like you, I could tell right away. And like, I mean, tell me if I'm weird, but like, you seem like a very humble person. Like, you take the way people look at you seriously. You want people to respect you for your work. And you said many times you didn't want your business to grow too big, which is kind of the opposite of what a lot of people say. A lot of people, when they get into business, they're like, I want the moon. I want this to explode, and I want to have, a Ferrari in the driveway, and I want this to have, be huge. And that doesn't seem to be the angle at all. And, that's something that comes across in the show. And I'm sure you've heard this before from other people, but, in the episodes of the shows that I've watched, you are kind of like the calming factor. Like, this is what we're going to do. This is what's happening, and sometimes those American shows or American built shows, there's a lot of like freaking out and loudness and aggressiveness. And you're not that guy, right? Like,
no, I'm pretty calm, and I appreciate that. The one of the best compliments I ever got was somebody that saw me on the show and saw me personally, and they said, "You're the exact same person on the show as you are in public." And I said, "Well, I really appreciate that, because to me, that's just how you're supposed to be." They didn't ask me to act. They asked me to do what I do, and I don't think I could act.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a lot of fun. It had its struggles, like everything does, but it was an opportunity of a lifetime that I would never give back. I have stories to tell, and I have met some amazing people that I still keep in touch with, and learned some stuff from other people that are just as talented or better or more. And so, yeah, it was a win-win. And the fact I made enough money to make it work, my family got to come down and visit me. Was it tough to be away 7 months? Yes. Was it a lot of hours to put in? Absolutely. But again, it was just one of those opportunities in life. Somebody interviewed me earlier on, and I said, to me, I'm a big hockey fan. I said, I've made my NHL. This is a big deal for me to be able to do this, and not many people get this opportunity. So I got to do it and get my mug on TV, and so here we go.
The experience of filming is an interesting one, because people don't see how it really goes. Like, I mean, they see the edited final version. And for those for the 2 seasons that you were a part of the show, how close was it from what was released to what was going on during those builds? Was it fairly accurate to capturing what you and the team were doing in terms of building these vehicles and the obstacles that you guys were given, or was it really dressed up and there was a lot of stuff that was taken out?
I think it was pretty good. What you saw on camera was pretty good. Apparently, we were one of the fewer shows that the people on camera are the ones that did 90% of the work.
Yeah.
And our timeline was pretty tight. We built some cars in as short as 6 days, maximum 3 weeks. Now, when the season was over, many of these cars needed some touch up and sprucing up, and some odds and ends, which is only to be expected. But most of the stuff you saw filmed in the shop was just as it was. Very little was scripted or edited. When they're out and about picking up bumpers, yes, we took the bumpers with us. We hit on the back corner and said, "Oh, look what we found!" As for as for almost any
TV
show
yeah,
like that.
Yeah.
But most of the stuff in the shop, and we would film 3 weeks at a time. Anywhere from 10 to 16 hours a day. So there was some grueling times, and it was hot as it's hot down there. So it's been a bit of a struggle, but
yeah.
And Vegas really is it's a car guy's heaven, because the stuff just doesn't rot. It's everywhere.
It is.
And so the stuff survives like crazy. So it was a lot of fun for a car guy.
Yeah, no, like I'm in Saskatchewan. We got enough salt in the roads. We'll eat your car down in in minutes. Like I don't take my Mustang out in the winter at all. She goes into her little hibernation hole and she don't come out till the snow's gone. So.
I would tease the guys down there. I said, "You want patina? Just bring it to Canada for one winter. It's free patina."
Then hit it with a clear coat and you're good to go.
Exactly.
So now, like where are we now in the journey of Grant? You said you hit your NHL and now you've been after the NHL. What do hockey players do? They either coach or they own, or they don't go back to the farm leagues. Usually, it's usually like you move on to the next level, but it's not a down level. It's kind of like a parallel level where you now try to contribute back, right? Would we be able to use that same analogy for what you're trying to do now? You hit your NHL and now you have your new shop and your new place. What's the plan?
Yeah. So I think the 2 seasons ate up almost 4 years between seasons and whatnot. So things are a bit up in the air. But now that I've, come back down to earth and settled back in, I focus on doing nice work. I try to avoid, I have the ability, I'm busy enough and I have the ability to avoid some of the ugly jobs, as I like to call it. And it's nobody's fault, just some of them are not that nice. And so I try to avoid those and stick to the nicer ones because I can, and they're generally more fun to work on and pay better. And it's not all about money. They're just, it's getting down to more what do I want to work on?
That's right. Yeah. And what's valuable to you? Yeah.
Yeah. And then there was talk of another TV show a year or so ago that would have been filmed here in Ontario. And if it happened, that'd be great. And if not, that's no big deal. Would I do it again? Sure, I would. But that's not my goal in life. If it was to happen, that would be awesome. I've thought about possibly teaching. If somebody would have me, I would probably have to finish up some paperwork on my own end before I could do that. But I'm not sure I'm ready to do that yet. I still love hands-on what I'm doing and try to just better my skills, buy the odd piece of equipment or update the odd piece of equipment to make my life easier in the shop and help me produce nicer work. I don't have any huge aspirations to build any crazy show cars or anything. I'm happy to do what I do. I'm trying to manufacture some parts. In the hot rod world, there's a couple parts we use a lot of, and they're getting harder to come by. They're made
off the rack parts for you. Yeah.
Yeah. They're made overseas or so the quality is going downhill. The price is going up a bit and the availability is getting harder. So I'm trying to tackle a couple of these problems and trying to make my own parts here in Canada, which I'm very proud of. So I've got a few on the go. And so if I could, do a couple of days a week of some manufacturing and then the rest of the week on my hot rod stuff, well, that would be awesome to me too. Just a small shift, but still car related.
Yeah. Yeah. If I could give you a piece of completely unsolicited advice, I taught for 8 years at the local college. I got the opportunity to go teach and I was working at that fab shop and then I got offered to teach. Just people, things happen, teacher retired, blah, blah. I had not had my shop for a number of years at that time because I went back to private industry. And I thought that going to teach was kind of over my head. I was about 36 when I got offered the job to go teach. And I thought, well, do I know enough? Do I really know enough to be a teacher? And there was a lot of self-doubt. And it was one of the best experiences of my life. Because first of all, you're in a learning environment. So you got all day to learn yourself. Like you have every book you ever wanted around you. You're surrounded by other teachers who have been teaching for 30 years. So they're very helpful to you.
Yeah.
But I also found out very quickly by the second year that pretty much every single welding instructor in Canada, at least, has a company on the side. Because guess what? You don't work in the summer. Right. Yeah. So I brought my company back to life by teaching. So basically, I would just do small manufacturing gigs over the winter because I don't like working outside. I'm not cool with being cold. I'm too much. I'm too much of a baby for that. So I would teach during the school year and I would do some manufacturing for some customers that I've had for a long time. And then summer would roll around and I would decide how much I want to work. Do I want to pick up a project? Do I want to maybe in Saskatchewan, we do a lot of shutdowns. So maybe I can go pick up a shutdown and go work on site for a couple weeks and I actually found that I was able to do my side hustle very successfully as a teacher. So if that's one of the things you're worried about, hey, just so you know, you do have quite a bit of time for the side hustles as a teacher. So
That's really intriguing. And I'm with you there too. I think, do I have the knowledge to teach these people, and yeah. So I have a friend who teaches at the local college right now. And so I get some feedback from him, and it's very interesting to see his take on it. And so I think it's something I'll keep in mind down the road. And if somebody would have me, that would be awesome. And I think, and then I could do a little less work out here, and maybe again some more time on my own stuff. Heaven forbid, the old shoemaker story.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would be awesome.
And then, in terms of people that want to, you know, reach out to you, social media is a great tool, but it's got a little bit of a double-edged sword sometimes. You said that the website's you've kind of floated away from that. You're kind of aiming to stay with the Instagram and the Facebook mainly, which is Schwartz Welding. I have your page here. And is this kind of the way you want to work your business going forward? Just finding people that reach out to you, a little bit of back and forth, and then pick up the jobs here and there. That's it. You're happy with that. That brings in the income you need.
Yeah, I have no plans to do any other big advertising, and I'm currently booked, probably about 8 months out.
Good.
And I don't want it to get much farther than that, because when a customer comes and says, "Yeah, I can do that in a year," it doesn't sound great for the customer. And I said, "Listen, I apologize. I'm not trying to put you off. It's just where it's at." So I'd like to get that toned down a little bit to maybe 6 months or less would be awesome. Plus, it keeps it fresh for me too. I know what's coming around the corner, and I can plan for that a little better. With past COVID and whatnot, so supply chains have changed a little bit. I'm getting pretty comfortable to understand how it works. So, but some people just don't understand that, that one part, I have a truck on the hoist now that's going to sit for another week for 45 minutes worth of work, but that part just isn't coming in until next week. And that's just the way it is. So, and I also say my stuff, the hot rods, they're not your daily driver. They don't have to be fixed today or tomorrow. And I try to keep people in that idea so they don't get excited it's going to happen overnight. So, so I have no big plans. The only thing my wife and I have talked a little bit about possibly is toying with YouTube a little bit. I see lots of people are doing that. The only problem is it would eat up a fair chunk of your day between filming and editing. And I don't know how to do that. So I would need help. What I really like to try and do is find a college student that needs some co-op and try it for a month or two. And I would pay them, and hopefully it would simply pay for my costs, and I would be a really happy guy. And if nothing came of it, so be it.
Well, I wonder if we could find some type of welding association that might be interested in doing some type of video with you. I wonder if that's something that could happen.
You might know somebody. I'm very fortunate. I'm very fortunate too that I have a bit of a working relationship with Lincoln Welding, which also came about through social media. They reached out and asked if I would, help them out with some. They're helping me out by giving me some welding machines to use, and then in turn I help them out on social media. But that's something that probably wouldn't have happened had I not been on social media. And I believe the TV show put me over the edge, in followers, if you will. So there's little perks that come up, like you said earlier about, the government grant stuff. That stuff's out there. Don't be afraid to ask for it. And I'm not the guy to ask for anything, but I'm getting smarter about, where I poke my nose now, because it's good for everybody also. It's not they're not just doing something for me. We're doing something in return, and it hopefully helps everybody out.
Yeah, I know the community is a huge part of this, and anything that helps somebody is opening a door, even just for giving options. People can just see like, oh, I didn't know that was even a thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, as we get to the end of the interview, there's a couple things that people always ask, and that would be usually in terms of what you do is, how do I get into this? If you're a young person and they're, I remember being 15 and buying my first car and having all these dreams, but you don't know how to get into it. And I think back then it was tough because getting any type of experience was kind of a luck draw, like if you got into the right place. But now with the internet and YouTube and all these things, you can connect people around the world. So for a young person today, 14, 15, thinking, I want to get into cars, or I want to get into like, how do I build vehicles, or kind of your world, what kind of advice would you give them in terms of getting started or getting out there?
I get that question all the time, and I think it's an
Mm-hmm.
awesome one. First thing I tell them is do stuff, and that's pretty vague. It says do. I don't care if you're fixing your lawnmower, the kitchen chair, the weed whacker. I go as far as say bake some muffins, and people laugh. And I said, no, you're following instructions. You're measuring things out, working the oven and the timer. All that information goes into your head, and it's good for so many things for the rest of your life. That's a really big thing. When it comes to the car end of it, I tell people, I says, go home and build something your own. I says, I don't care if you're going to modify your wheelbarrow. It doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
The best way to do it is to have something of your own, learn some skills, bust some knuckles, get some burns from welding.
Buy some tools.
Yes, and that's a bit of a problem today. I think a lot of people probably don't have any hand tools even, and have never tackled something as simple as hanging a picture. So, and then eat up whatever. If you can take shop at high school or college, man, eat that up, because there's so much information there. And you just to get your fingers wet on a lathe or a mill or the welders, or the auto shop, electrical. I don't care what it is. Get your fingers in there, and then it's just start knocking on doors. I was lucky enough that I was offered a job, but I also know I had a guy in my welding shop. His buddy was working for me, and his friend just showed up a couple times, and he kept asking for a job, and I didn't know what he could do, but he said, he goes, listen, I'm not going to leave until you give me a job. And he turned out to be one of my best employees ever, right? He was hardworking, had some knowledge, willing to learn, and just absorbed it all. So it was really great for me in the end.
Yeah,
But yeah,
the tallest tree gets the most sun, right? So
yeah, you just really have to get in there and do things. And again, I joke, like, I don't care if you want to knit something. It's everything you can fit in your brain will help you somewhere else down in life.
yeah, no, and that is so true. And even your career, you never know where your career is going to end. You don't know where it's going to go, and it takes loops and turns and whatnot, right? So,
Exactly.
and then for the last question I have for you is in terms of, you know, the the future. Where do you see the future of this industry? I think about this all the time, and I don't really have a lot of people that I talk to about this because I'm a car person, but cars are going in a very different direction. And even the industry and what you can do with welders is a very interesting direction. And I don't mean interesting in a bad way in any way, because like, I mean, I can buy a welder today for $200 that'll do more than any welder I've ever owned in my life. So like, I mean, there's ways that technology are making things way more accessible and easier for a young person. But then there's some things that are going to get a lot trickier and weird going forward. So for the hot rodders and the car builders and the people that are on this side of the fence in terms of the fabricating of vehicles, how do you see the next 20 years for this industry?
Well, that's an interesting one. The one thing I'm worried about is I think you're gonna see more laws coming into place of what you can and can't do to customize these vehicles. And do I love it? No, but I understand this is just going to happen because some people have abused the system and
For a
are
long
doing
time. Yeah.
dangerous things for lack of a better term. So,
Mhm.
and I also find the hot rod industry goes in waves as some young people coming up aren't interested for this decade or this term, and then you might get another wave in another 5 years. So it goes up and down. But gosh, the technology that is coming around for all the equipment we can have in our shops is pretty mind-boggling,
Mhm.
and makes many more things achievable. So I think you're going to see some different type of building come around with maybe for us less fabrication in it, but it'll be equally challenging and interesting when it's done, because of all these new skills that are evolving with the equipment to back it up. I'm just blown away. I could watch a video of a CNC mill or a CNC laser buzzing away for a half an hour. I'm just mesmerized by it, and what it can pump out.
That's
Where
right.
you and I would have done it with a hand grinder and a drill press at one time. You think, oh my gosh, that was a lot of work. So
With a table vice clamped down to a drilling
I think
table.
you're going to see different a different group of people tackling some of this stuff.
Mhm.
People that don't have maybe all the hands-on skills that you or I might have, but it doesn't matter. As long as people are doing things, I'm proud to be a part of it, and hopefully it continues on.
Yeah, I was tackling this question in my mind the other day. I saw a whole bunch of new EV rules come out, and I drive a vehicle that in 10 years probably won't even be allowed on the road. Like it decibels, fuel mileage, everything about it is terrible. Like really, if I was to be honest about
Mhm.
the vehicle. But then I had a friend come over who's a mechanic and a machinist, and together we built an EV charging rack because he's dismantling an electric vehicle and changing up the battery configuration so that he can pump another 80 horsepower of electrical power out of it. And he needed a new custom charging rack for the frame. And that kind of made me happy again. I was like,
Mhm.
there's always a way. There's
Yep.
always a way. Like he's got this, electric Corolla that he wants to get up to 400 and some horsepower of electric power. And he's researched it and he's done all the stuff on YouTube, and he's have to build a new charging rack because the way that you line up in the parallels. He was explaining it to me. I'm like, okay, it's over my head, but I love the idea that there's always a way to hot rod a car. And a hot rod doesn't have to be a 32 coupe or a 69 Mustang. A hot rod can be whatever car you want it to be.
Exactly. And that's changing too, because we're getting older. The year of the hot rods is starting to creep up. At one time, anything past 60 was considered a new car, but now we're in the 60s, 70s. I heard the latest truck fad is like a 90 Chevy truck.
Yeah.
They're coming back hot and heavy.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting how things change over the years.
Late 80s Mustangs are the biggest thing to buy right now. Are you kidding me? I threw 2 of those away. Like what?
Exactly. Right. So, and I love following along. I don't mind the
Mhm.
changes. Most of my stuff stays pretty traditional. Trucks are very popular right now.
Mhm.
All anywhere from a 1928 to
88.
late 60s or 70s is super
Yeah,
popular
yeah.
right now. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, this has been a really, really fun show, and I'm out in Ontario fairly often, so hopefully I can catch up or maybe make a rip out to visit your shop. How far are you from Milton? That's where CWB headquarters is. Are you far,
Oh,
far
I'm
away?
45 minutes.
Oh, good. Maybe I will rip out there to see you next time I'm out there.
Well, yeah. Let me know.
Awesome. And for all the people who've been following, if you want to find out what's going on in Grant's world, it's Schwartz Welding on Instagram and on Facebook. They just follow along. If you have any questions for him, you can reach out to him through social media or reach out to us if there's any questions you will have of us that we could pass along. And, we're always very happy to assist with the connection. So, Grant, thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks, Max. I appreciate it.
Awesome. And for all the people following, please keep downloading, liking, and sharing the podcast. We are, getting close to that 100th episode. We got hopefully some cool things planned, and we are planning for FabTech here in November. So we'll see you down in FabTech as well. So everyone take care and keep tuning in.
We hope you enjoyed the show.